I have to start by reading the Zoom opening. So we're starting the meeting at 6:31. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order permitting virtual meetings during the COVID pandemic, the Board of Health is conducting this meeting today. Not the Board of Health, excuse me. The 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee is conducting this meeting today, January 5th, 2021, on the Zoom platform and in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st, 2021 as amended. I ask that all committee members, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on the town's website. All committee votes will be taken via roll call. We will start with an attendance roll call. I will announce your name. Please reply. For members of the public, please unmute yourselves when I open the meeting to the public comment. Honestly, I don't really care if you keep your microphones muted or not, as long as it's not disturbing to anyone. So you're welcome to unmute. And let me do the roll call. So Pam Rockwell, I am here. Nick Pappas. Fred Stewart.
Here.
Deborah Farnsworth.
Here.
Len Rapoli.
Here.
And our liaison, Matt Johnson.
Hello. And I just
Hi.
wanted to note that I'm going to need to drop off quickly because I've got two other meetings that at 7 o'clock. So
Okay.
I'll be here for a little while. I just wanted to make sure that I introduced myself as your liaison and tried to keep abreast of things.
I did want to introduce Nick Pappas is our new member from the Natural Resources Commission. He's replacing Judy Zombrecker.
Yes.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I've been in natural resources about almost 2 years now. And yeah, I've been aware of this from the Long Range Planning Committee. We took a tour of the 2229 Main Street site, I recall. And we're beginning discussions then. So I'm aware of the project and just sounds like it has a lot of natural resources, well, not potential, but there's a lot of naturally occurring things like that bog there that are just wonderful. So we're very interested. Thanks.
Yes, we're trying to get rid of the unnatural things, and the natural things will be very nice.
Well, unfortunately, those are natural too, some of them.
So the first item on our agenda is the meeting minutes for November 5th, 2019, because we didn't meet in 2020. So do committee members have those minutes in front of them?
Yes.
Does anybody want to make any changes?
I've read them and I'm happy with them.
I've read them and I don't have any changes.
So the only thing that I would make the change about is that we are the Main Street Oversight Committee, not the Advisory Committee. So Len, if you could fix the committee name.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
A motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Deborah makes a motion to accept. Fred, did you second them?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Pam says
Aye.
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 Deborah says,
Aye.
Fred says,
Aye.
Len says,
Aye.
okay, that's it. Nick, you get to vote on this, I
Hi,
guess.
although I wasn't here, so I'm not sure it's irrelevant.
Okay, so that was unanimous. So the next item for discussion is the NMI Starmet Reuse Committee draft report. So the NMI Starmet Reuse Committee started up in the first, about a year and a half ago, basically in response to the town wanting to take ownership of the site, and it's to develop some recommendations for the select board about what they should do about the site. So I actually have a slide presentation for you. So
Okay.
I am going to share my screen, share the slides, and go this. So I'm starting out, my first sheet is the one of the first things that the committee did was work with a contractor from EPA to develop a reuse zone, potential reuse zone map of the site. So this site, if you're not aware of where it is, this is on Route 62, heading west out of West Concord, almost to Acton, and it's nestled into the Thoreau Hills neighborhood. So the committee charge was to assist the town with planning. There's a final design going on right now that should be completed maybe in 5 to 7 years. The site will be cleaned up. And we're working on this report to give to the select board to let them know. We adopted the principles from the long range planning committee about that it should have multiple uses at this site and should be environmentally friendly and supportive. It should not cost the town a lot of money. Either it pays for itself in some way, or we make money off of it some way, or it reduces a charge that we would be spending somewhere else is the goal. And that the community, it strengthens the community. It's not just serving one person at this site or one particular group, but that multiple people would be at this group. Some of the issues that we have to really tell people about the site. Risk communication is a problem. The need for potential need for housing at the site, the recreational needs of the town. These are all things that the other committee is working on. So this is the reuse zone map. You'll notice that it's divided up by color. The yellow area, the A area, are areas that could be potentially redeveloped. Area A1 is basically where the buildings and parking lots were for the site there. There's building slabs, there's still parking lots. Some of the parking lots are going to get scraped and removed. The building slabs are going to get removed. It's going to be refilled and it will be cleaned up to a residential standard there. That area is actually a really prime site for redevelopment at the site. There's a ring road, a driveway that goes around it that's some of it's dirt, some of it's paved, but it could easily be a sort of delineator for this site of where development occurs at the site. Area A2 is a wooded area right along Route 62 that's never been built on or had hazardous waste dumped on it. Likewise, A4, which backs up to the woods behind Thoreau Hills, is also an area that has never been developed, is beautiful wooded site, is untouched and has never had any hazardous waste on it. Area A3 is where some dredgings from a cooling pond at the site were dumped. And so that area, even though it has some beautiful trees on it, it's going to get dug up. It potentially could get leveled and turned into a playing field or restored as a natural site. But it's a prime area to be developed. Area B on this site is the site of the old holding basin at the site. There's going to be an underground cement structure isolating the depleted uranium and chemicals that are there deep below the ground, all the way down at the bedrock. That's going to get capped. That's going to get covered with a lot of fill. It could get paved and be used as a parking lot, but you can never put a structure on it that might require any footings because you can't dig and disturb the cap. Area D is a cooling pond and native areas that is probably going to get restored as drainage for the site. It is wetlands. And it's probably a great place for storm management. It's also a great place to have rainwater gardens and beautiful ways to actually develop drainage at the site and take care of that. It doesn't have to be just a big lake full of rocks to allow things to drain there. Area C is basically, it's not completely untouched. Some of area C2 has an old landfill in it that will be dug up and restored, but it's really all wetlands, and that zigzag area in the middle is a sphagnum bog that's 1,000 years old. It is a beautiful masterpiece of nature. And in fact, the people that break into this site to trespass, they are there to look at the birds at this site. This is actually a gorgeous asset to this town. And it's pretty much universally decided amongst our committee and the people that we talked to that this is an area that should be left or restored naturally, that this is not an area that would ever be developed, that what needs to be cleaned up should be cleaned up. Trails would be a good idea for this site. So the big part of what our committee has come up with is a basic master plan for this site. We think that this area A1 would be a great area to redevelop almost immediately, but we also would love to see the environmentally sensitive areas integrated into the site. So we'd like to see this map here is actually a map that includes the Concord trails from conservation areas nearby. So the Powder Mill trails, this is where they could link to trails on the site, and where potentially we could put an environmentally sensitive viewing area so that you could look in the sphagnum bog without getting engulfed by the sphagnum bog or disturbing it or eroding it. And so this is actually an important part of our master plan, is that a good 20 acres of this site is going to be kept natural, linked into our already important trails in the site in Concord, be accessible to people with ways where they don't have to drive necessarily. And then the next part of our master plan reuse idea, once we've separated out the sea and the wetlands areas and technically the parking lot or grassy knoll that will be the old holding basin, is to actually, we all agree that the best place to redevelop this site is on A1, that this is a primary place for redevelopment, that the site is an ideal place to link to transit from other towns. Maynard and Acton have public transit that go to the train station and to places like Emerson Hospital, that this could actually be not a transit hub, but a bus stop equivalent, that there's potentially the areas of A2, A3, and A4 could be developed later for housing, sports fields, or some other use at the site. But that this is sort of the plan, is we conserve area C, we develop area A1, and then we, over time, think about developing other parts of the A area, A2, A3, A4 in the future. That's the basic idea of this. And our committee actually went to the trouble of getting opinions from people. We had a big forum over a year ago. We had a survey. We've been talking to different boards and committees, and we're still seeing a lot of nervousness about housing at the site, but also a lot of very positive feelings towards the site. So this is something that could really be happening. It is dependent on us taking ownership of the site. So there are three basic ways that we see of developing the site. The first way would be that within that area A1, we would have an indoor sort of community center. This could be council on aging. This could be a track and basketball and gym space. This could be a senior center. This could also be, potentially we're modeling this off of a similar development in Colorado, where they also have meeting rooms, which are important. In Colorado, they've cited this so that their meeting rooms look out over mountains. Here we have a beautiful sphagnum bog that we could overlook out of, and that area could be something that ends up being something that the town could rent out on weekends, or just use for meeting space, or use for some other kinds of space similar to Harvey Wheeler or something like that. The theoretical other uses would be, since it's a recreation center, indoor recreation center, having outdoor recreation sports fields in areas A3 and A4 would also be a sensible use of that. The other areas at the site, but that could be developed over time. Another thought about it is similar to the other idea of but this would be a commercial establishment. This would be medical offices or some other commercial use of the developed area, the site. Potentially, we could put housing on areas A2, A3, A4 later on over time. And then the third idea is much more dense, where we really don't do much with A2, A3, and A4, but we put dense mixed use, recreation, entertainment, retail, offices, artisan space, and housing all in that center A1 area. It's a big footprint. You could put a lot there. The idea is build up and not build out. In the case of all of these, there would be solar power, there would be low impact development. We could put battery storage. This site, if you this site is actually really located. There's across the river is our solar panel farm at the Grace site, the West Concord solar panel farm for the town. And the electric supply comes to a substation on Forest Ridge Road. So actually putting a battery storage facility on this site too, which is very small, very low impact on the site, would make good sense. And then if we have solar power on the top of all of those buildings or in the fields around those buildings that we build there, we would actually be able to store the excess energy. Because right now we're actually, when it's sunny, we're taking all we can get. And it would be nice to be able to hang on to some of that energy to dole it out later. So this is what our committee is doing right now. We're developing we think that the town should develop a path to ownership. This is what's in the document that you may have been looking at. We want to actually start active planning on the master plan concept and basically look into the other thing, talk to the select board about how we should be starting to talk about this site. So that's, and that this is, so I wanted to talk particularly to our group here about risk communication, because this committee has been about safety at the site, about getting the best cleanup at the site. That's been our job, is to look at the data. And so one of the things that we need to be doing is to start communicating that this site is already a lot cleaner than it was. There's already been a lot of the contamination. The holding basin sludge was removed. The buildings have been removed. Barrels have been dug up. The groundwater treatment has been started. This has already gone a long way towards cleaning up this site. And when this site is clean, it is not going to be the kind of situation that it was when it was an active factory blowing stuff out of its stacks and dumping things in its backyard. So we want to talk about, from my committee, I particularly want you to look at the risk communication parts of the document and see where there are things that you can add to that. We want to be sure that we're getting the data out there to people and getting an understanding out there to them. And also we want to be, in our document, we're going to be citing other examples of Superfund sites that have done this properly. But also we want to think that one of the biggest strategies is getting people to this site and getting them using it. Because once you get comfortable using a site, once you see it, once you realize what's there, once you're going there every day or comfortable there, then you're going to be more comfortable about what needs to happen at that site. And potentially putting housing there or other uses at the site. The other thing is the question of housing at the site. The committee has, some people were really objecting to the idea of housing at the site, but this site is being cleaned up to a residential standard because we might use this for a residential use. If we take this site and say, well, we're not going to use it for a residential use after all, we need to be prepared for the fact that they might change their opinion on that. Now, that's not going to change what happens to the holding basin, because the holding basin is about cleaning up the water to a drinking water standard, which is unrelated to the residential standard, but it might impact how much of the dirt is removed from the site. Also, it's a really beautiful site that we don't have large buildable parcels of land come available in Concord very often. So it would be sort of irresponsible not to think about affordable housing at this site. So this is where the draft report is located. You've got a link to it in your agenda. And I would like to, so does anybody have any questions before we continue talking about this? I can't see everybody, so just start talking. Nick? Nick, you're muted.
Oh.
Okay, now I can hear you. Oh, muted.
Unmuted.
Now you're
Okay.
good.
I was just curious, do you have a rough idea of how deep the bedrock is under there?
I don't know right off.
It's not just-
It's more than 100 feet. It's like more than 100 feet down.
Oh,
They're digging really far down to put cement all the way down to the bedrock. So
just a quick thought. If there is consensus emerging or emerges about the natural area and, you know, making it available and visible to people early on in the process would certainly be a way of making the whole site, drawing the community into it and communicating a message about its safety. You know, the wildlife are there, people are there. I mean, it seems like a good way to begin the process and roll things along. It was a quick reaction.
it's also the easiest development to do as well. So, you know, putting in trails is a lot easier than building a recreation center. So that's true that I do think that very early on will be the first part that people are already accessing this site illegally. So
Yeah. Well, I think, Pam, your suggestion about having the trails that already exist, you know, hooking up with the trails that are, you know, on the Starmet property, as Nick said, to go around the natural resource, the bog areas, because there's so many trails that are already there that people in town use, you know, off of Thoreau Hills.
yeah, that's actually Paul Boehm's idea,
Oh, wow.
and that was
Yeah.
his map that he created, and it is a wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful
But
idea.
I do want to comment on the reuse, the planning committee report that you put together, and the things that I was most concerned with when we first got started, when we dealt with you know, risk communication with the general public, was explaining S1 residential standards, and I think you did an excellent job in layman's terms in this report. I think it's on under that section, I think it's 3.2, you know, how you explain the residential standards and how important it is that they understand that getting EPA to agree to these, to bring them down to these standards, is something that we really should take advantage of.
I think that it's a really important thing, so I'll pass that on.
Yeah, and then the other one was town liability, to get across to the town before they vote that the, you know, because it's a Superfund site, that the town's not going to own am I still on? Yeah, will not own the responsibility or the liability for the cleanup, even in the future if something new is identified. I think that's important, and I think you got that came out as well in this document. So I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, all the environmental issues were pretty much covered. I think it looks pretty good, but I'm willing to help with, you know, communication any way I can. So just let me know.
Pat?
I think just to highlight, though, that this is not sort of just a simple process. The select board today received a letter from an insurance broker in town who has served on the finance committee in the past, and who expressed very detailed concerns about the town's liability with regard to the site based upon her experience many years ago with other episodes in municipal insurance. And so I'm just saying, I don't think that this is, a discussion that's over. And in fact, she intends to make a presentation to the Concord Business Partnership tomorrow morning at their meeting, elucidating her concerns. So, this is, I think, is something that the risk communication is going to be probably a very big task over the next few months.
I think those are
Has
two
that been-
separate issues. One, the risk communication with the general public is one thing, and then as far as the liability for cleanup and for the hazards that exist and potential, that possibly could be found, or is more of a legal issue, something for the attorneys to deal with. I've seen them before, written up in documents where you can take ownership of it, but not ownership of the environmental responsibilities. Those will
She
remain.
addresses
with
that
you.
too in her letter, and also
Okay.
recommends no residential, and there's lots of detail there. So I assume that this should be forwarded to the committee as a whole, but and I've sent it to Pam. So just a note.
Mhm.
I didn't get it. Did you send it to me?
Yes, I emailed it to you just a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
Is her presentation being recorded? Is it written down?
I think that their meetings are available, through Zoom, just like everybody else's, but I don't know if they're recorded. I haven't attended a business partnership meeting in about a year.
Okay.
part of the problem is that what happens at this site, though, actually does affect us whether we own it or not. And so owning it may actually be the way to keep everybody in line, to make sure that they do what's needed to be done, to say that we're going to put residences there so we know that we'll get a residential cleanup out of it, even if we postpone that to 2020 or something. That's there's something to be said for the fact that this is we don't own it now, and it's had a big effect on our lives already. So anybody else have any comments?
And unfortunately, I will have to drop now. So
Okay.
Sorry to drop that bomb and then leave. But,
Yeah. We've got
No,
technical
that's
stuff to
good.
do too. So
information is useful. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Sure. Bye.
Terry, Amity, Tim, do you have any comments that you wanted to add while we're working on this?
Well, my only comment thinking about it is perhaps crew, if it still has any body and clout, could at least make some statements to the fact asserting that, yes, we also have been following this, and yes, they have done a good job of cleaning up. And yes, we do think that this is suitable for the uses that are being proposed.
Yeah, that would be nice if crew actually did do some PR about risk communication. So anybody else?
I'll add something.
Yeah.
The location of the property at sort of at an edge of Concord, for certain things like athletic, where people might be driving, would have to be driving from all over Concord to this edge of Concord, seems like it's a lot of possibly unnecessary driving involved. Whereas the fact that this virtually abuts Acton, does abut Acton and Sudbury, and is very close to Maynard, seems like the opportunity to do something more regional or something that would involve the other municipalities is it's a strong possibility here. It's something we wouldn't have if this were closer to the center of town.
Yeah, I'll have to say, when I was looking into the idea of having an indoor track there, the thought of the fact that we go to track and we don't have an indoor track in Concord, so we go to other towns for that. Being able to host track meets here, I think, would be a really cool thing. So that would end up being regional, even if it didn't directly benefit them. So
it might benefit them. I mean, constructing some sort of regional facility, whether it's athletic or otherwise, is a real positive.
Anybody else have any comments before we move on?
This is
I'm
Amity.
all set.
Hmm?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that all sounds wonderful. It's really interesting to hear about the existing natural sites, and really exciting to hear about the development, the plans for development of trails in those areas. And I think, as you say, I think that could go a long way towards making people feel comfortable and excited about that area. And yeah, I'd be happy when and if that site becomes accessible. I am already working with the Trails Committee and doing some trail stewardship, and I'd be happy to do any kind of, ecological survey, or setting, some kind of little pamphlet about ecological highlights of any of those trails, anything like that. I love doing that kind of stuff.
Great.
Cool. Okay. So I want to urge everyone, committee or not, to please look at the report, make some comments. If you can see where you think that the selectmen need more information, or perhaps something needs to be said better, we could use, or your opinions about what things should be. The opinions you expressed here, I'll get back to the committee, but I do think that we all have a role in that. And probably we're going to do some more outreach in some other ways about things. So next thing is the draft of the committee annual report. So most of you, people who are on the committee, should have a copy of this, but I don't know that most of you do. So what did people think of this? And the other question is, did we actually have a meeting in January? Because I sent out an agenda. Did nobody show up for that meeting?
I don't think there was a quorum for that one, Pam.
Yeah, okay,
I think only a couple people showed up.
okay. So, so what did people think of the annual report?
I don't have it. I've read it. I don't have any comments. It looks, it's short and to the point. I think it's good.
Len, were you good with it?
I am good with it. I think it's pretty much succinctly stated everything that we did and went on over the past year. I think it's fine.
And I'll ask Matt on his own whether he wants to be Matt or Matthew. You guys good with Fred and Len and Nick?
Yes,
Sure.
yes, it's fine.
Okay. So no other comments about this? I can go ahead and send it in.
Sure.
Comment.
Okay, that was easy. So the next thing is that as part of the remedial design process, while they're developing their work plan, they had to do more testing. And one of the things that happened is that Pfas, basically the Teflon-y type chemicals that are everywhere, there is a new drinking water standard in Massachusetts for PFAS. And so they have done a bunch of new testing. So I'm going to try to share another screen. I don't know how well this one's going to work. Okay, so is that, you should see a picture of the site with little circles on it, and dots.
Yep.
People have it. So this is the data that has been collected about PFAS in the plume that's heading under the river towards the Acton drinking water well. And this was actually, this document was presented to a meeting of Green Acton by DeMaximis, I believe, and they may have added circles and such to it. But what you see here is that there is indeed PFAS in the plume, that it drops off as it approaches the Acton well. Acton has PFAS in their drinking water that's going to need to be treated. And there's a question about how much of it is coming from Starmet, how much of it is coming from the Gray site, and how much of it might be from other sources, because it's pretty endemic everywhere. What this data shows is that there's definitely a PFAS problem, that it drops off before it gets to the drinking water well. This data is from after there was already pumping going on to treat 1,4-dioxane at the site.
Mhm, mhm.
And the
Okay.
1,4-dioxane treatment involves a pre-treat of a charcoal filter before it's before the light and chemical treatment that is used to get rid of the dioxane. So there's a good chance that the pumping is already affecting this data. So that it's not clear what the source in Acton's drinking water is, whether this is something that had already reached the drinking water and now is restrained because of that. But this is going to be our probably next big technical challenge at the site, is in addition to dealing with whatever else shows up as part of the remedial design. So
Pam, I just looking at the map here. It seems that the highest concentration is either right under or right down gradient of the holding basin. And then it drops off pretty steadily to the northwest. And by the time you get to the river, it's down below the drinking water standard.
but on the other side of the river, it's
Well, that's what
high.
that was some the Acton supply well 1A. It's got this huge spike of PFAS in it, and
And
is
that's
this-
pre-filter, is my understanding, because the water is actually treated there. And it may well be that what ends up in the treated water is much lower than that number.
well, it would have to be because it's the way it is
Yeah.
now. It's above the drinking water standard, but even a blend of Acebit 1A and 2A, the concentration is still above the drinking water standard. But I guess the point I wanted to make is that it just seems like this suggests to me that there's multiple sources rather than just Starmet. Because like I say, it reaches below drinking water standards by the time it gets to the river, and then all of a sudden, on the other side, you've got this. It's really seems like it's more of a hot spot there, which would suggest the multiple sources, which would probably be more than likely be the Gray site. So that's.
I believe that's true. I think that's right. I just feel like this is new data. This is something we need to think about.
What is the drinking
Part
water?
of it would be whether we're going to have more sites that actually pump and treat. Were you talking, Tim?
Yeah, what is the drinking water standard?
It's 20 parts per trillion.
Okay.
And
Now, the
the,
other question I had is if EPA does want to clear, doesn't clean this up, are they gonna clean up the PFAS to residential standards, drinking water, the MCL?
It's
which is
not, it's
20?
water. It's not dirt, it's water. It's going to get
Right.
cleaned up to drinking water standards.
So that's 20, as opposed to it's the standard's a little different for EPA. It's they have a health advisory of 70 parts per trillion. So are they going to clean it up to their health advisory, or are they going to clean it up all the way to residential drinking water?
The
standard?
Mass standard, the Massachusetts drinking water standard. My understanding is that they should be cleaning it up to the Massachusetts drinking water standard, because that's a real standard that Massachusetts adopted. Is not the same thing as a health advisory. So, but I do not know. I think our voice is going to be important on making sure that this is taken care of. Although Green Acton seems to be taking the lead on this because it's affecting Acton's wells.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily need to clean the groundwater up to residential standards because the MCL refers to water that's ingested by people. So obviously it would be water that's following treatment. So the concentration in the groundwater in the individual wells could be higher, but the concentration at the end of the delivery system to consumers, because it's treated, would be less. So they could.
Okay.
Good.
So I think of this as an interesting problem because one of the things is that when we were talking about TCE and DCE and the breakdown products of those in the initial plume, before we talked about 1,4-dioxane, before we talked about PFAS at all, it was going to be a pump and treat, and in 40 to 50 years, it was going to be gone and it would no longer be in the drinking water. So theoretically, you could have drinking water that was safe to drink at this site. And I was under the impression that the record of decision is still written that way, that the goal is to clean it all up, not to just accept it and do pump and treat that is or pump and dump that's a barrier to it. You know, it's the idea is to treat it so that it will be gone. I don't know what these numbers mean as far as that, you know, whether that's possible that in 50 years we could pump this out. But certainly they are talking about an activity limitation that says you can't dig a drinking water well at this site. And, you know, are they saying that's going to be forever? I'd
Well,
really
I
like
think over time, time it probably will. It will be lowered just because it's amenable to the same process of remediation as 1,4-dioxane and the VOCs. So they're treating the VOCs and 1,4-dioxane. It'll also treat the PFAS too. So it may be
an interesting problem because I'm starting to get calls about the 2 houses that are for sale on Main Street there, and they are the 2 that were just built. One of them actually has a monitoring well on it. So I got calls from the real estate broker who was like, and I have no idea what that means, whether that means that they need to, you know, what kind of restrictions they have on what they can do with the site because their new house, theoretically, because of having a monitoring well on their site. This is the first example where I've seen something on a residential property like that. Also, how do they access funds to get testing or to get a system insight to clean subsoil, to deal with subsoil VOCs?
Pam, these are questions really for Bruce. It's been my experience that when they were doing the environmental assessment portion, there were monitoring wells that were installed for sampling. It's most likely just an old monitoring well. Probably nothing has to be done with it. It was probably the Maxis should have abandoned the monitoring well if they're not using it anymore. I don't know whether it's
abandoned or not. You know, this is new building.
So it may not. So you don't. So we need to find out if this is the question. Yeah, you know, they need to, someone installed the well, and they was most likely installed in the sampling round. And I don't believe that they found anything on those properties because it would come up in a 21E in a site assessment, and we would have seen the data. Would be one of our points.
I actually recommended that they call Bruce for the information because I said I didn't know the answer to that.
Yeah, they're the ones that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's monitoring wells all over, I walk in those woods, you know, behind in Thorough Hills, the powder mill. There's monitoring wells all over Concord.
Yeah, but most of them are on town property or municipal property of some kind. they're very careful to try to avoid.
Well, at the
putting-
time, the property, was that property owned by House? Is that who owned that property at the time? I don't know who the owner was, but they must
Yeah.
have, they had to have gotten permission to install it. Most likely it was a monitoring well
Okay.
that they don't use anymore. So most likely it was, you know, there wasn't any contamination, and I know they did soil vapor analysis, and I don't remember anything in those areas. So,
So I can talk to Bruce about that. But
yeah, and
But
I'm
this
curious
is
too now, because
actually-
they shouldn't have left it on private property. They should have
well,
abandoned the well.
it may still be part of the monitoring program. So
Oh, God.
I don't know. You know, this is going
Okay.
to go on for a while, that we need to be sure that the monitoring wells are not disturbed. So,
All right. Well, let's find out.
yeah. So do you think that we should be pressuring Bruce to have another meeting? Let us know how it's going. I don't know when his remedial, because I haven't talked to him in a while. When the cleanup plan work plan is going to be public. Normally, they would have been having a meeting in December or so, was the original plan for putting it out for public comment and having a meeting about it for the
I mean,
remedial design.
we really haven't heard anything about the results of the treatability studies that they're supposed to be conducting.
Okay.
So I think it might be a good time for a meeting with Bruce.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him at least to give us an update.
Is the slab removal part of the remediation plan?
The slab removal will definitely be part of the remediation plan, but it's not part of the design process, which is about to be over. The design process is to come up with what the cleanup plan is going to look like. So there were treatability studies for the uranium underground, for the different kinds of organics, to be able to stabilize them underground. So whether that's going to be apatite or some other thing. There were some studies of the concrete that they were going to be using for encircling the holding basin. There were new studies about 1,4-dioxane in the bedrock and the Pfas study. So there were a bunch of new information that they were gathering. So I don't know how well that's going, but I know that they got their wells in time to do what they needed to do. They got their sampling done for the summer, even with COVID. So okay, so I should ask Bruce about giving us an update meeting.
Yes, I think so.
I think that'd be nice.
Okay. Okay, and do we have any, so I think we have covered most of our agenda at this point. If there is a meeting with the Grace people about the PFAS data, is there anybody who wants an invite? Nope, okay. I'll probably go to that. No, Nick would like that, okay. I need you to say something, guys, because I can't actually see all of you.
Okay, all right, yeah, sure, yes.
So,
Since I worked
so that
on
was Deborah
both-
and Nick want to both go to that meeting.
Yeah, since I've worked on both sites, might as well follow up.
Yeah.
Pam, do you have, that map you just showed is part of a document where there are keys that explain all those numbers like MW and monitoring?
Could you
well?
not see the key is on the right-hand side? Did you have your Zoom screen on top of it?
That key didn't explain all the things that were there.
Oh, okay. Let me see what I can find and get it to you before the Grace meeting.
Okay.
There is a data table, actually 3 data tables that describes where those wells are screened. whether it's overburden or bedrock. So that does help.
That's good information. Where is that?
It was actually sent to circulated to crew.
Okay.
It originally came from Acton, from the.
That, I think this might have been the same information. I don't recall
I
seeing the
think it is,
other.
but it lists all the wells and it describes the locations of the wells and whether it's bedrock or overburden. So that's has some explanation to it.
Well, I will try to see if I can get that further information for you in anticipation. Glenn, did you want to go to the Grace meeting?
I think I'll pass on that one. Thanks.
So, okay. So is there anybody, would anybody like to speak from the public about
Yes,
any particular issue they'd like to talk to about this committee?
yes, I
Tim?
would like to speak.
Yeah.
First of all, can I be put, is this a Zoom meeting presumably?
Right.
Great, yeah, I would like to be notified of that at least, or invited if possible. I missed the other one and I wrote them for the minutes or the one, but I never got a response. But
What other one?
one that happened about 3 months ago that was going to be on the Pfas, the Acton Green, whatever another.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't, are you talking about the Acton, the Green Acton meeting? They only invited Acton people to. Are you talking about Bruce's meeting?
No, I don't think I'm talking about the Acton meeting, and they said that one could get a copy or a recording of it. Was that not correct? This would have been what, 5 months ago? I don't know.
Okay, so
Up
we
here, I
didn't,
lose time with everything, so.
this committee didn't meet in 2020.
No, not this committee, the Acton Green Committee or whatever it was.
Okay.
Didn't they have a meeting on these PFAS?
They did, and I wasn't invited to it either. So
And it wasn't any public.
they had Bruce come talk about PFAS to them, I think, or
there
do it
wasn't
over
any-
Zoom. So
Anything written left over of what
that
happened?
map is what came from that. So I don't know whether there's a recording, but
Well,
I
anyway.
can look at that.
That would be, I would be interested in if that exists, because that I think also will explain maybe some of these, the map that we just saw. Or
Yeah.
the other thing that strikes me here, and if I tell Nina this, she will reinforce it, is I have a little bit of a credibility problem with this whole site when we think we're doing well and we've got the VOCs and we've got the uranium and we've got the chlorinated solvents all analyzed and everything, and bingo, up comes dioxin out of the blue. And then we think we got that pretty well under control. We're going to working on that. And then bingo, up comes PFAS. One question, if I was a doubting member of the public, would be, what's going to pop up next? And obviously we can't answer that, but we ought to have some kind of way of responding to that question, it seems to be.
So my response to that question, this is is in my report, actually, in the report from the NSRC to deal with risk communication, where people concerned about that, is that the same way Concord can take this property without taking liability, people who were liable have that liability forever,
Mhm.
right? And we are in a unique situation where there are several different principal responsible parties. The Army is a principal responsible party of this because they provided depleted uranium to Starmet for free. And
Yeah.
so they own everything that was left of the site. If there's depleted uranium that has made its way to the Assabet River or whatever, the Army still owns that. And so they are basically responsible for 99% of the cost of cleaning up the site. But two companies, Whitaker and Textron, are also
Mhm.
responsible for this site. And they are responsible for this site because Textron and Whitaker are responsible because of other things that they did. And they are viable companies that are still in business and they want to stay in business. They are not like Starmet, who wants to go away, and they recognize that everything that's left behind is they're still responsible for.
Yeah,
And they are doing the project management of the site. I just want to finish this metaphor for explain it. So they own the liability forever, just like the Army does, but they are not really footing most of the bills for this site. And so every time that something has shown up at this site extra, when there were barrels of beryllium found under the cooling pond, next to the cooling pond, they removed them and got rid of them during the remedial design. When when they discovered that the beryllium was more active, they spray painted stuff to keep it from stabilized while the buildings were being demolished. When they discovered the 1,4-dioxane, they immediately started work on it. They didn't wait around for that. When they found that the dioxane is actually in the bedrock, they've started a study on that. Every single time they have jumped at the chance to get ahead of a problem before it becomes part of their legacy, to be sure that this is cleaned up right the first time so that they don't have to dig it up again and do it again. You know, that's one of the reasons there are charcoal filters, and it is expandable where they're doing the 1,4-dioxane treatment. That's probably treating the PFAS already. So I'll have to say that that's something we do need to keep communicating. Nick, what were you going to say?
Well, that doesn't
No,
speak.
wait, I'm sorry. Let me just respond to that. But I understand all of that. And that's not really, I don't think, going to convince people. They say, well, yes, we have someone to clean it up and responsible. But if I find out that I have been walking on these paths for 8 months or something, and I have been exposed to this kind of stuff, how can I really be sure that there isn't some stuff that we have not yet found? And of course, the answer is we can't. But what do we tell them to try and reassure them that we think we've done a good job and no one can know the future completely? But I'm just thinking we start writing a risk assessment reassurance, you might say. This is something that I would be bothered by, and I could think someone would come and ask this question. So I think that has to be addressed as part of the risk communication.
Tim, to
I'm
answer
going to
your
go back
question
to,
about
I want to go back to Nick. Whoa, Nick.
It's more or less the
Oh.
same thing, which is, I think the issue you have to speak to with the public is, how am I going to ever be comfortable that you might not discover that something is unremediated that is now known to be a serious problem? That's the problem. That's exactly what the issue is.
It's not a scientific problem. It's a psychological problem, I guess I would have to say.
Okay,
But you know, we have to deal with it. So,
Deborah?
All right. A lot of issues were just discussed. So the first question I think that Tim was talking about was the 1,4-dioxane and the PFASs. 1,4-dioxane was not looked for, okay, in the past on any of our sites in Massachusetts and throughout the country. It's a compound that's been recently looked at, found to be pretty hazardous, and now it's standard, and we're going back to all our sites. And the same thing with PFASs. We weren't looking for them before. Now it's required to look for these analytes. Those types of things, yes, we don't have control over, but at least we do have, as Pam was saying, we'll have a condition where it'll be their responsibility, the former PRPs, to do the cleanup. And I think assuring the public and educating the public, I think Pam has done an excellent job in keeping it simple and keeping it to the facts of responsibilities.
That does not answer the question at all. The real question is, how could I ever be comfortable going on that site, knowing that there may be something harmful there that no one has realized is harmful yet? That's the question.
Well, how can you go anywhere then? How can you go in your backyard?
This
I
was
mean,
a
it's the
site
same,
that was- this
if they're
was a-
not looking for it, they're not going to find it. But they've done risk assessments, vapor extraction, soil sampling, sediment sampling, groundwater sampling, bedrock sampling, every type of sampling that's been done, and risk assessments, clean up to what the residential standards are of what we have now, so we'll feel comfortable there.
This is
and-
an emotional
Point out
issue.
that
And
the
my-
1,4-dioxane and the PFAS, we didn't look for them before because there wasn't technology to look for them before. The technology
you.
improved, and when the technology improved, they looked for them.
Mhm.
I think you need to think about this. I'm going to use a gas station as an example. A gas station is probably one of the most hazardous places you go to in your lifetime. There's underground tanks with an underground source of toxic chemicals that are explosive, carcinogenic, and toxic at every gas station. And the vapors that come out of the nozzle are harmful. If you smoke a cigarette, you could explode there. People are very used to gas stations. They are the number one, non-military hazardous Superfund sites and number of Superfund sites in America because of leaky tanks and things like that. But people still are comfortable going there all the time because they've been going there all their lives. They're comfortable with being able to control the risk by themselves. There's a value to comparing it that way. And I think once people actually get on this site and get seeing it, they will get comfortable with the idea that what we are talking about is either so far underground or such a low level of contamination that, yeah, maybe we'll find something else that if you lived there for 70 years, it might increase your cancer risk, and they will
Right.
clean that up. But
But you also have to
that is
look at
still
the
not going to really, it's not like there's a radioactive cobalt source sitting there on one of the paths that nobody has noticed, that people
Right.
would
And
get
if the
sick from just walking on a path. Or
Pam's point is well taken, because at the gas station, it's volatile, so it's in the air, you breathe it. When you're walking on the path up there, or 1,4-dioxane in the groundwater that's, 20 feet below the ground surface, or in the bedrock well, 50 feet, by walking on the site, there's no way you're going to get any contamination coming out of the groundwater. And the soils have been, all the hazardous soils have been removed to a certain depth, and the areas like the holding ponds will have covers on them, so you can't even, dig to get the contaminant. So it has to be a source, like inhalation, ingestion. I mean, all of those things have been looked at. I mean, that's what the risk assessors did.
I still see Nick's point, though. There could be something else that is discovered at this site. The same way we discovered Teflon was bad for you. That is why we're talking about PFAS, is because people were cooking in Teflon pans.
But the only way we're going to but the only way we're going to discover anything is by digging up something new or something. It's not going to be accessible to the hiker and the walker on the property. Or in
the analogy was made to something like, for instance, my own property, right? My property has never been a Superfund site. Okay, the risk between my property and that Superfund site is many orders of magnitude different. We do not have an inventory of every chemical that was there, or the byproduct of how the chemicals may have reacted with each other. We just don't know what was ever there.
So my property was never a Superfund site either. My property was a pick your own asparagus and strawberry farm at some point that somebody had in their backyard. And there was a guy who collected old cars and refinished them in his garage back there. So the chemicals that are, I do not grow anything back there because there's almost certainly arsenic and lead from colonial, gardens.
I think we're getting off track.
Look at, we don't need to discuss this because we are really talking to the converted. Every one of us here knows all the rational arguments about why that question is not rational, you might say. What it really means is whoever delivers this message is the one who has to have sort of such, shall I say, gravitas, that people say, oh, well, he said so. And this person is in the past someone I've believed and I think is correct, and I expect that he will do it. So this risk communication seems to me has to come from someone that really does have psychological, you might say, control over the people that are reading it, to recognize that, yeah, what this guy is saying is good enough for me.
Okay, but also when with the risk assessment, risk assessments have been done, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and when I said your backyard, they're saying that they're cleaning, we have a record of decision that we're going to clean to residential standards. So that's what was meant by your backyard, because that's what residential standards are. So if they clean to those standards, that means that it's appropriate for residents. So that's the data. Those are the facts, and that's what needs to be presented.
I'll have to say, though, that one of the things that's true is that you actually don't know what's in your backyard necessarily.
Well, most people don't, but I do.
There have been all kinds of things that get used that people are exposed to all the time. What's in your drinking water, what's the classic example of people's exposure to uranium. Most people who were exposed to uranium in this country were exposed to it in China, in dishware that was made with uranium paint. That was a beautiful orange that people still collect, actually.
Yeah.
So,
well,
that people need to actually get comfortable with the idea that this is a place that people are watching. Whereas your backyard, nobody's watching that to make sure that there wasn't anything, that there weren't chemicals dumped there, that you're not dumping the oil after you change the oil in your car into your backyard somewhere, that you're, those are the kinds of things where that's the advantage of municipal water versus having your own well, is that the town is testing the water.
Well, maybe you're getting close to a good answer, which is instead of focusing on the site, you focus on the town when you answer the question, and you look at risks everywhere, and you try to explain this is the most monitored and measured site in town.
Yeah.
We're not saying there couldn't be something there, but there's probably a greater risk that there's something in your backyard because nobody's been measuring there.
That's a great point. And so this site's been over tested compared to the rest of the town. That's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. And you have some people who are worried about liability who want to be ahead of making sure that everything is cleaned up before it creates a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
I went over my house and backyard with a Geiger counter, and I did find something radioactive, and what I found were the bricks were radioactive. So if your house has you have a brick house or a fireplace, why they're more radioactive than the surroundings.
My property was a pig farm.
A pig farm. So, Amity, did you have any questions?
No.
Nope. Okay. So, so, I mean, we don't actually have a Dr. Fauci in town who can soothe everyone's souls about this. Were you suggesting, Tim, that how exactly are you suggesting we sort of demagogue this?
I wasn't
Because I'm not sure I like that idea.
I was just looking and thinking about this risk communication and shuddering. That's all.
Yeah.
But I think it could be worked out. We will never convince my wife that place is safe. I don't care, with all of supposedly my experience and knowledge and knowing what's happened and followed it and everything else, I don't have a prayer to convince her. so you might say I'm not the person who should be doing this, because if we could find someone who can convince her, then that's our model. So I don't know. I didn't mean to throw this into a complete turmoil, but
it is an important question, though. You're right that is something we need to figure out. So,
I'll think about it.
okay. And again, comments to the NSRC about their report. If you, the things, that's a good comment to the report that I will add too, about being able to convince the inconvincible and to talk about, to use the.
I thought the report did a good job in convincing on several issues, so.
I think Nick's point about, you know, maybe adding the discussion of this is the most monitored and tested part of the town, you know, and comparing it with your backyard, which is not nearly, unless you're Fred, so monitored and tested.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, all right.
Can I just say, I did try to access that report, and it asked me to register with my email address or give my email address to receive it, and it kicked up an error.
Me too. Me too. That does not work. I tried it in 2 different web browsers and it said error.
oh, okay, so you couldn't get to the report.
Yeah,
Can't
I just assumed then it was not,
Oh,
it was not
Speaking of
for
which,
public
Amity,
comment.
do
but
you want to get
I couldn't get to it
copies?
either.
I would
Amity,
love to. Yeah, I would love to get a copy. I would love to read it and make any comments if they occur to me.
Okay.
And
What's your
similarly,
can I get your
just
email?
Oh, yes, I can. I wasn't. Yeah, I can give you
So
my email
I'm pam@tiac.net.
at
TIAC.net.
TAIC.net. Okay.
IAC.
pam@tiac.net. If you want to send me your email, I will add
Sure.
you to the list of people who get notifications to this, and I will send Nick and Amity actual copies of the document.
And can I just also say quickly that at least on the Concord government website, because you just mentioned an annual report, the last annual report that's posted up there is from 2013, I believe, from this committee. So I don't know where to find that either.
So the whole annual report, see, our annual report is actually something that's then put into the town's annual report. So you can look in the town's annual report for that. And we
Great.
did have one last year.
Okay.
So that
Thank
we
you.
used to post them, but then we were told, but it's in the annual report. So, so
Okay.
maybe.
Thank you.
No,
That's
but
helpful.
yeah. We also don't have a lot of minutes posted too, and I'm trying to fix that too. So thank you. But you should also be looking at the NSRC website too, as well, to see. Okay, anybody got anything else?
Good.
So I think, so I will get email from Amity to her, and we will, and I will send out the copy of the actual report to people. It might fail because it's big. I think it's 52 pages long or something like that. So, but I'll go ahead and send that out to the mailing list, so that as opposed to just the link. And Tim wanted to find out if there's a copy of a recording of the Green Acton meeting. We want to get Bruce to have another meeting to update us if possible. And I'll get comments back to the NSRC that we made tonight. And let's see, our next meeting is the March, let's see.
March 2nd, Pam.
Yeah, March 2nd,
Okay,
Tuesday, March 2nd. Do we want to do that at 6:30 or 7:30?
7:30.
6:30.
What was that, Nick?
6:30 is good.
Later for me, later's better for me, but it's not critical, as long as I know.
Okay. Karen, by then, maybe I will be able to host.
It's okay. If you need help, I don't mind.
Okay,
well, I'll
Hi,
get-
Karen.
Hi, Deb.
thank
I
you.
will, I'll get the Zoom information for all of you.
Okay.
and then
So
I'll
the next
send-
meeting will be March 2nd.
Yep.
And I'll send out stuff, and please make comments on the NSRC report as you see fit, and we'll try to get Bruce to host us a meeting. Oh, and I'm gonna get information for Nick and Deborah to go to the Gray site meeting too, was the other thing. Okay, anything else?
Good.
Then we are adjourned.
We have to adjourn with the roll call, Pam, on Zoom.
Oh, okay. So do you have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Nick makes a motion to
Second.
adjourn, and Deborah seconds. Nick, you want to adjourn?
Aye.
Pam, aye. Fred,
Aye.
Deborah,
Aye.
Len?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.
There you go.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
you.
So,
Take care.
thanks. Thanks
Bye.
again, Karen. I appreciate the help.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Pam.
thank you, Karen.
You're welcome, Deb. See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.